Hello everybody, hope you're doing marvelously well. In this episode, we're going to talk about the top 11 mistakes to avoid in music production. Thank you ever so much for watching. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe, and there's a little bell that comes up, and if you hit the bell, you will be notified when we have a new video uploaded. Also, you can go to producelikeapro.com and sign up for the email list and get a whole bunch of free goodies. We have drum samples, courses, all kinds of fun things that you can do when you sign up. So over the years, the producer's role has changed unbelievably dramatically. There was a time when a music producer was essentially a person that put the whole thing together. They did the production, if you like. Not the production we see now, but the classic production of hiring the studio, getting the best musicians, getting the arrangers to write maybe string arrangements or write the parts for the musicians, hiring the engineer, hiring all kinds of additional musicians that may be needed. The point is like that was the job of a producer. It was overseeing, making sure the charts were done, everything. Now, these days, the job of a music producer is vast. It is so vast, it covers pretty much everything. As a producer, you can be expected to be also the engineer, the mixer, the songwriter, definitely the therapist, and quite often the record label, the co-promoter, social media manager, and all kinds of other fun or less than fun things. Luckily for many of us, those are the kind of things that we all love to do. And we like to be challenged in many, many different ways. However, that does create a lot of grey areas. And it's in these grey areas that things can fall horribly apart. So let's talk about the top 11 things to avoid. The top 11 mistakes to avoid as a music producer. Number one, this is the most important one for me. Not understanding the artist's vision. It is really important as a music producer to understand the vision of the artist. Now, I know that sounds really obvious, but you really need to scrape the surface. The artist might come in with some references which seem fairly straightforward. However, there's been many, many recordings. I've done what I believe the artist wanted from me, and I have been really, really wrong. You need to really fully understand what their vision is. They may play you a hip-hop song, but they're not a hip-hop artist. So you build a hip-hop style groove, and then you realize that isn't what they liked about the song. What they liked about it was something to do with the rhythm in the vocal. However, you've just gone ahead and built a groove which doesn't help the rhythm in the vocal. They wanted coaching on the rhythmic elements of the vocals. And when they come to sing, they're like, well, where are your ideas for the rhythm in the vocal? And you're like, what do you mean? It's amazing just how many mistakes we can make by just peripherally listening to what an artist suggests and not really understanding what they mean. You will find artists who will be very, very blunt and say, I like the drums from this song, I like the bass line from this, and I like the overall mix of this song, and I like the vocal sound from it, whatever. You might hear all of these different things, but you need to question and just see if you can really fully understand what they mean. Because they might like a vocal sound on a song, but that might be because it's an acoustic guitar vocal, and you realize that you're not going to be able to get that vocal sound on it because they have an incredibly dense EDM production that they want to do. So how are you going to get that big open sounding vocal that they like on the acoustic song to fit in the big massive square waves, huge synths, massive drum beat song? So you need to get those things cleared right at the get-go. You need to understand why they're referencing the songs and what they love about them, because if there's going to be any issues, you need to address them early on. Point number two, not being honest with the artist. You need to be honest with the artist. If they are doing what we just talked about and playing you references like huge open sounding vocals, over a single acoustic instrument, but they want death metal or huge EDM track, you need to say to them, it's not going to be possible to have an open sounding vocal and a dense track. So then you need to find references that make sense. If they don't understand what you mean, try and find things that are dense somewhat, but really show off the vocal. To be honest, it will help you too. You've got to be honest with the artist. You can't say yes just to get the gig and then literally spend 2 weeks frustrated pulling your hair out because you can't do what they ask because it's not possible. Having a great relationship with your artist is of paramount importance. It will establish something which could last for years. So being honest with them will always help. I can't tell you how many records I've made where I've been brought the demos and I have been honest. And I have said, I don't like the demos. I think the tempos are wrong and the keys wrong. All kinds of things. I think the instrumentation might be wrong. When I don't like something, I will be honest and say. When I like something, of course, I will also say. And your artist will respect you. They will respect you for being honest. You're better off being honest than taking on something that you'll never be able to do. Because if you do that, you could ruin your career by never actually finishing a project or having music which is incomplete or not what the artist wants, and you are going to look bad. So be honest with your artist. The third mistake you have to avoid is not being tactful. This is huge. As an engineer, I've been in so many rooms where I've watched the producer and the artist, the singer, the guitar player, whatever, getting into fights. In fact, I've been in situations where I have been less than tactful and they have always backfired. So after I've done this for years and years now, I have learned how to communicate. And the way to communicate is to find what you do love about something and bring that to the fore, because you need to empower your artist. You want them to feel valued. So if there's only one line in a whole vocal part that you like, or 3 or 4 words that express what you want to hear, pick up on those words. Pick up on that line, pick up on that expressiveness, and tell them how much you love that and how you want to hear that in the rest of the song. Don't go, there's only 10% I love and the rest sucks. Don't do that. Pick up on what you love and say, I need more of that. Don't point out the negative just for the sake of it, because it just comes across as arrogance, ego, and one-upmanship. And I can tell you a lot of producers that have made great records that don't get to make more records, because even though they may have got the results, the artist doesn't want to work with them anymore. So you really need to find a place where you can encourage and empower your artists. Find the positive creativeness of what they're doing and bring that to the fore. So when they leave you, they feel good about the experience and they will want to work with you again. So number 4, not being responsible and reliable. This is a big one. This really is. When somebody hires you and is paying you money, it may not be the biggest sum in the world, but this, for them as an artist, they may have saved for months to be able to go into a studio and work with you. And if you're showing up after them, if you are not giving them the time and you're just sitting there staring at your computer playing video games or chatting on Facebook, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. This is somebody's whole life and their art and their career, and they're putting it in your hands. You need to be responsible and reliable. They are paying you for your time, so give them your attention. Of course, there's going to be times you've got to talk to your significant other. There's got to be times when stuff has got to be done, but that's okay. You can explain, hey, excuse me a second, I've just got to send this email. I'm not ignoring you, I just have to deal with this thing. I find myself saying that all the time. I might be answering a YouTube comment in some downtime. Trust me, this is what we do. However, you are there and you're being paid by them. And remember, if they've saved like $2,000 or $3,000 to come in and record with you, that might be all of their savings for that year. And that's a big deal. A lot of people make just about enough money to survive these days and pay their bills and maybe their rent or their mortgage or put their kids in school or whatever it is. And they don't have a huge amount of disposable income. So be reliable, be responsible. Remember that this is very, very important to them, and be respectful of their time, because then they will come back to you over and over again. 5, this is a big one. Thinking that you'll always have to have an opinion. one of the things I've learned from not only producing, but also being on the other side of the glass and being in a band and being an artist myself, I didn't have to have a producer always tell me that something could be better or different or anything. Sometimes they had an amazing skill set of just letting it progress and then only step in where necessary. As you've heard me say many, many times, one of the things I learned from Dave Jordan was sometimes you have to pull a song apart, you rewrite it, re-record it, change the key, the tempo, the arrangement, everything. And other times you just have to get out of the way of the artist and help them make a great recording. And that can be a whole album like that. It could be one song. It could be a piece of a song. The skill set is knowing when to get in there, pull it apart and improve it, retrack it, whatever it might be, and then when to stand out of the way. Because if you get out of the way, you get your ego out of the way and you let the results speak for themselves. As you've heard many, many producers say, including myself, one of Stevie Wonder's greatest skills, as Quincy Jones said, was he always leaves enough room for God, meaning he keeps his ego out of it. And that is a big, big deal. You want to be able to encourage and empower the artists and the musicians that you work with so they give you great results. Sometimes it's just about being there when they have a question, and other times it's about getting there and rewriting it. And sometimes it's a little bit of both. That's the skill set, and that will get you more and more work. Here's one for us on a business level. Number 6. Releasing the song before you've been paid your back end. This is a big one. This is really, really tough, and it's a tough one for many, many people to understand because we do quite often end up creating really great relationships with artists. However, it is still a business. And if you're making a recording and it's just say it's $2,000 for this recording, maybe you took your $1,000 up front, which I highly recommend. You get paid your $1,000 up front. Then you're owed $1,000 on the back end. Do not send the final mixes until you get paid the back end. Make an agreement that you will get paid your back end when you finish the recording. The last thing you want to do is get so excited that you let them leave the studio with the recording, and let's just say through no fault of their own, something terrible happens, like their car breaks down and they have to rebuild the engine. Boom, that $1,000 they put aside now has to go to the engine that has to be rebuilt. The problem is they're now in this position where they're down $1,000, but they've already got the song. And they feel bad, but there's not much they can do about it. And time passes. And now you become a pain because every other day you're emailing them, maybe once a week. Hey, I'm sorry about your car, John, but I still owe that $1,000. Would really like it if you could get the money. First one, they respond to and say, sure, yeah, I'll get it to you as soon as I can. 2 weeks later, send an email. Yeah, I'm trying. It's a bit difficult to save up the money at the moment. Maybe on email 3, they stop answering. Email 4, they're completely ignoring you. Now, a couple of months has gone by. Maybe 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months has gone by. And they've got an opportunity to maybe do a song for a commercial or something like that. And they have a small budget. Maybe it's only $500. But they want to hire somebody to do it. Maybe they want to co-write it with somebody and split the money with them. And maybe there's going to be a big residual income. All of these things happen. But they're afraid to come back to you because they owe you money. And they can't pay you that money. So what happens? They don't come back to you. So not only do you not get the 1,000, you don't get more opportunities. So this is really, really important. This is one phrase I try to install with all the people that work with me. You teach people how to treat you. It's a big deal. It's very important. If you make it, you get paid when you deliver, they will respect you much more than if you let things slide and you're all loosey-goosey about it. I talk to this about all the time when I'm doing business stuff. If anybody is working with me, I say, respond to the email immediately. And they're like, oh yeah, I forgot. And then they respond 10 days later to a question. What does that show? That shows the customer that you don't really care about their record because you spent 10 days getting back to them. So why would they go and work with you? Oh, it's not important. So you teach people how to treat you. So if you say to them, I cannot give you this final mix until you pay me my back end, you'll get the back end. You'll get it back end quickly, but you'll get the back end. That is you teaching them how to treat you. So it's really, really important. Don't give your mixes up, the final mixes, until you got paid your back end. Number 7, not working with a contract in place. This is a big deal because not everybody has money for legal requirements. I understand. I will say when I first started producing, I paid a lawyer inexpensively, as much as I could afford, to do a one-page agreement which would cover doing anything from one song to 5 to 10 to 20. It was just one page, and in my basic deal points, I could fill in the numbers of how much they owed me and the amount of songs and the front and the back end payments. But the terms were always agreed up front. The problem and the reality is every record I've ever made that is not necessarily a handshake, but is done on a promise, they always backfire. They always backfire because you don't, first of all, you don't have anything clearly laid out as to what your role is. So you hear the words, "I thought you meant," and it's never to your favor. Nobody ever comes along and says, "Hey, buddy, here's $1,000 from this sync I just got for $2,000. I'm giving you half the money. I thought you deserved half the money." Well, maybe they do, 1 in a million times. But the point is, if that's the deal you've got and you're splitting the ownership of the master 50-50, put it in a contract. Put it in something that's really, really basic. Like I said before, I got one drawn up years ago, and then I used that for the longest time and just tweaked it to fit. Now, of course, I have a lawyer draw up a contract for every single project. But to get me started, I had a simple one-page agreement where I could fill in the amount of songs, the payment, the start date, the end date, the terms of payment. Everything was on that one page. So everybody understood the details. And it was signed by both me and the artist or artists if it was a full band. Get it on paper. If you don't get it on paper, you are increasing the chances that you're not going to get what you agreed on. And it just feels so much better for both of you, you and the artist or artists that you're working with, to feel comfortable and confident moving forward, so you understand what your roles are, how you're going to get paid, how many songs they're expecting, whether you're going to mix it or somebody else is going to mix it. All of that can be put in a simple one-page agreement. Now, I will say if you're working with a label, it's usually a lot more than one page. You'll get a deal memo put up, and then you'll probably have to go and do a full contract, which can be a lot more pages than one, like a lot. But the reality is like always work with a basic, simple contract in place that you both agree on. 8, burning your bridges. This is a big one. And I think I have made this mistake in the past. When I was young and I was working 15 or 18 hours a day, I would get really wrapped up in everything. That was all I cared about, was the music I was making. I would just work super, super long hours. I would write and rewrite and replay and remix everything. And I was so massively emotionally invested in it that if I didn't get my proper credit, I didn't get everything that I felt like I could deserve from it, I would get angry. And it took me a bit of time to learn how to control that. The biggest lesson I ever learned was from Jeff Jampol. Jeff, I'm calling you out. Hello, my friend. Jeff is a big manager, and he manages a lot of estates of artists, legendary artists. Like I think he still manages, as far as I know, The Doors, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin's estates, and maybe many others now. And what he does is he's really amazing at being able to like get incredible deals for the families of those now, for a lot of deceased artists. And he makes sure that everybody's looked after, and he understands fairness and how to make great deals. So I went to him, and I had made a record, and they had used my files that I'd made the record with another producer. And somebody else had taken my credit, and I had produced this, and the guy that had taken the files to use had given me an engineering credit and had taken the production credit. And I got really, really frustrated, and I called Jeff Jampol. And I said, "Hey, Jeff," told him the story. And he was like, oh. I told him all the details of how much work I put into it, how long it took, how much development I had done with the artist. I told him this big, long sob story. And this is how he responded. He goes, "You know what, Warren? You are totally right. I would be really angry and upset at what happened if that happened to me. Somebody has robbed you of the proper credit, they probably robbed you of income, and all of this good stuff. However, You've got two choices. Number one, you call that person up and you scream and shout at them and tell them they're a total a-hole and they stole everything to build their own career at your expense. You could do that. And what would happen? You'll never work with them again, and you could well have destroyed a massive opportunity to continue working with them. Or, number two, you can ride it out and build a relationship and keep working with that person. And I chose relationship number two. And I did that, and I went on to make a lot of great records because of that relationship. That is the most important thing. You need to keep really strong relationships alive. And sometimes, especially when you're coming up, you have to swallow your pride quite often. I'm not saying actively go out and get messed over. I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying understand that you need to keep really strong relationships. I have no problem when telling somebody they may have messed up. If an album comes out and my credit's not on there, I will go and I will call and ask if it was a mistake, who made the mistake, and can it be rectified? Of course I will. I'll make sure that I'm credited. There's been many, many albums I worked on that have come out where I've not got the proper credit, where I'm an engineer even though I'm signed on as a producer or co-producer. You know, I've never accidentally been called, actually no, I've been accidentally called a producer once when all I did was engineer. And that was with the amazing Mr. Paul Gilbert. He gave me a production credit while doing some engineering on just a couple of songs on an amazing record that he did. That is because he's super talented and a really, really generous person. Guys like Paul Gilbert are one in a million. Super talented, incredibly nice guy, and gives more credit than where credit is due. You're not going to find that very much in any form of entertainment, let alone the music industry. So you take that as the unicorn, if you like. The reality is you're going to have to ride a lot of situations where somebody may do less than you and take more credit, but there is a reason for this. Mistake number 9. This one completely relates to the last one. Altering the terms of your agreement after you started recording. This is a tough one. You've heard me talk about this one as well, many different occasions, but like I say, I wanted to pull all of these together. This is one that's a big one for me, and I think I've been asked about in a little bit of minutiae, a little bit of detail, but let me talk a little bit more about it. Quite often in the past, I've been hired to engineer because I'm a really good engineer. You're probably a really good engineer as well. We get asked to engineer albums. Absolutely wonderful. However, there's also quite often with me an ulterior motive. If there's a younger, more inexperienced producer or somebody that's never produced before and they have got themselves into a position to be the producer on the project. Trust me, it happens a lot, and I'm sure many of you have great stories that you can put below. They hire me because I can produce. I can also play multiple instruments. I know how to communicate with singers. I can also write songs. So you hire me as an engineer with the expectations that I'm probably going to do a lot more than just engineer. I am very aware of that. So if I agree to be paid as an engineer and to be credited as an engineer, I know that going in. I know it going in. So if I want to then go in there and produce the tracks and be involved in the arrangement and get the best drum grooves and all of those kind of great things, you know, if I do all of that, I can't then halfway through the record complain that I'm doing all of those things and not getting credited, because I knew going in what I was going to be credited at. It will create all kinds of tension in the studio if I start acting like I should have more. The reality is like I need to lay out what my role is and have a very firm discussion in it. And if I take on an engineering only gig and get paid to do that, if I choose to do more and bring more to the table, that's my choice. I can't penalize somebody because I help them rework a song dramatically. Then just don't rework the song. And you know what? I probably then won't get hired by that producer again. So again, it's about understanding my role. If my role was an engineer who just also happens to have a ton of other skills, then I'm going to get hired. I've been in a room with some of the most talented people ever who are working within 1/10 of their talents, but they're putting all of their energy into that one role that they've got. Like I can be in a room with Dan Rothschild playing bass. Dan Rothschild is a world famous, amazing bass player who also can sing like a bird, has an incredible percussionist, an amazing producer who produced better than Ezra's first record, which sold a couple million albums, in his bedroom. So that's the kind of guys that I get to hang out with in a room. A bass player who can bring all of that level of talent to everything that he or she does. So that is a norm. You go to one of these incredible sessions at Capitol with jazz players, you know, that have been doing this for decades. Each one of them probably owns a beautiful studio and records film and TV commercials and produces solo artists and bands and everything. Just incredible talent. 50, 60-year-old guys and girls just like sitting there playing their instruments, sight reading, who can run circles around tons of people. However, they got hired to play their instrument because they are amazing at it and they know how to integrate. Would any one of those walk into a room and tell Phil Ramone or David Foster they were doing it wrong? Of course they wouldn't, because they understand their role and they also understand that David Foster and Phil Ramone were and are the best at their jobs. This is the point. It's like being really good at lots of things doesn't mean you have to use them all at the same time. It's like we're going back to talking about ego. You've just got to understand that we're here to serve our artists, to serve the song. And with that sometimes means you have to swallow your pride and just be a worker amongst workers. Number 10, this is an interesting one. I don't hear it as much as I used to, but this was a big discussion, definitely in the 90s. And you're going to know a couple of big court cases as a result. And that is, if you're going to use samples from other people's material, clear it first. So, not clearing samples first. That is a huge mistake to avoid. And we all know where we're going. Bittersweet Symphony. We all know about the They didn't clear using that string part before they released the song. And as we probably all know, and you can go and check out, the Rolling Stones ended up owning the whole song, I think. Now, I think they recently, a couple of years ago, came to a much better understanding that's more reflective of how Richard Ashcroft's writing and the band's work is represented in a percentage against the original string part that they sung over. Now they've found a place where I think it's quite amicable. However, it didn't initially. Initially, they lost all the publishing because they didn't clear the sample and they used it without permission, and that was a big no-no. So you do not want to be in that situation. If you're going to use other people's music in your own, whether it's taken from an MP3, from vinyl, from tape, make sure it's cleared and credited. Credited and cleared, cleared and credited. Both of those things have to be done because that person or people that created that music are inspiring you to write new music. They're co-writers of your song. Simple as that. If you take an amazing string part, whatever it is, and then you write something, you're writing from that. They created the music for you to write over, so they are now a songwriter. So make sure you clear it, make sure you figure out the right percentage, and make sure you do everything above board, because it can come back to bite you pretty badly. Number 11. I don't know how to do 11 with two hands. 10, 11. I think this is one that we are all guilty of, and I have maybe still sometimes can be guilty of. And that is believing that you have to make everything perfect. This is a double whammy. This is like sitting there gridding everything so that it's completely and utterly perfectly sample accurate, tuning everything so it's absolutely perfect, just going through everything so that there is nothing left that's exciting in the track whatsoever. There's no rough edges and perfect. That's number one. That will destroy your production by just making it so it's just a mechanical, unfeeling heap of whatever. Number one. But secondly, probably more importantly, and the main reason why I'm talking about do not be a perfectionist, is the fact that you will never, ever be happy. When we talked to Bob Clearmountain the other day, after the camera stopped rolling, I went over to the SSL and I asked him a couple of things like, oh, what's coming down that channel and blah, blah, blah. And we started just chatting about working on SSLs. And he said to me, I never, ever solo. I always listen in context of the song. And he said, I always listen to everything as a whole and I don't focus on the minutiae. And it just brings home that point of working fast enough and not getting obsessed with perfection. Because if you solo something, you might hear a little wisp or something that is not evident in a track where the cymbals are going crazy. So you sit there and you start removing a little slightly aggressive high end that you cannot hear in the track. And before you know it, you start taking everything and perfecting it and perfecting it and perfecting it. And suddenly the 40 or 50 or 60 or 100 tracks are all so perfect that you put them all back together and all of the life and the energy and the excitement and everything has just completely and utterly disappeared from your track. Same when recording. You sit there and you get somebody to do it over and over and over again. And all of the feel and the performance of them hitting the drums, it's now boom, da, boom, boom, bam, boom, da, boom, boom, bam, da, da, boom, ba, da, ba, da, ba. Nothing's there. Where it was like boom, da, da, boom, bam. You had like a little bit of a groove. It swung a bit. The drummer was like pushing and pulling, like even on the velocity it was like da, da, rather than da, da. It was like, and it made it feel exciting. That is a real skill, is to not over-perfect stuff. And also, you start to rely on perfection. And perfection is how you measure things. That is not a safe way to make music. You lose all kinds of clarity. So don't spend too much time making everything perfect. Listen as a whole. Fantastic. Are there any tips that you want to add down here? Thank you ever so much for watching. I really, really appreciate it. This means a lot to me that you're all such incredible parts of our community. Thank you ever so much. Have a marvelous time recording and mixing and mastering and all that good stuff. And please subscribe, go to Produce Like a Pro, sign up for the email list, get a whole bunch of free goodies. And of course, leave some comments and questions below. I love getting in there and answering them all. Even though I am still a professional producer, mixer, mixing an album at the moment, engineer, and songwriter, and all that kind of good stuff, I still find time to answer questions. I'm not a professional YouTuber, so I don't just make videos and then answer one or two questions to appear really, you know, hey, I just lowered myself. I love getting in there and answering as much as I can because it's really, really important to me that this be an actual real community and not just a way of like going, hey, look at me, I've got a YouTube channel. That's not important. What is important is the community, and you are incredible members of the community. Thank you ever so much for all of your support, not just for me, but more importantly, for each other and helping each other learn. Have a marvelous time recording and mixing. I'll see you all again very, very soon.